Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Classic Gaming Brothers. I'm Zach.
And I'm Seth.
And we're the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right, we are the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right.
That's right.
Seth, you're currently on a cruise ship, aren't you?
I am. Yeah, I think I am on a cruise ship at this time. Maybe perhaps I'm on a cruise ship from 1912.
I hope you're not on the Titanic. Historically, being on the Titanic does not end well for people.
Perhaps I'm an agent out of time.
An agent out of time? You're going to go into the fake smokestack?
And meet with Colonel Zeidel.
Yeah.
Do you know that Titanic Adventure Out of Time, you're not only a time traveler, but you are in fact out of time? You're out of time because you're a time traveler, but also out of time because of the Titanic sinking?
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
Anyway, Zach, since I'm away on a cruise, what have you been playing?
Seth, recently I've been playing a game that's actually relevant to today's episode. I've been playing Sonic Pocket Adventure. Sonic Pocket Adventure was developed by SNK and published by Sega and released in 1999 for the Neo Geo Pocket Color. It's a fun little game. It's basically just an 8-bit remake of Sonic the Hedgehog 2, complete with all the levels that you'd expect from Sonic the Hedgehog 2. So you have your Emerald Hill Zone, your Chemical Plant Zone, your Casino Night Zone. A lot of the levels do have different names, so it's not one-to-one Sonic the Hedgehog 2, but you can definitely see where the influence was pulled. However, because the game was released around the same time as Sonic Adventure, a lot of the art in the game is similar to Sonic Adventure. So Sonic has green eyes, and he has buckles on his shoe, and Robotnik appears in his modern design toward the end of the game. So it was released kind of as a tie-in to Sonic Adventure. It's a fun little game. It's nothing really to write home about. I would say if you like Sonic, you probably would like Sonic Pocket Adventure. If you don't like Sonic, I don't see a reason to play it. And if you like Sonic but you don't love Sonic, you probably don't need to play it either if you've already played Sonic 2. But anyway, that's what I've been recently playing is Sonic Pocket Adventure. Seth, what about you? I know for a fact you still play video games even when you're on cruises, so don't lie to me.
That's right. I do in fact play video games on a cruise, but lately, right before I left, I was actually playing a game that you were recently playing, and that's Arcade Paradise, which was released back in August of 2022 by Nosebleed Interactive and published by Wired Productions, who we actually met at PAX. They tattooed they tattooed their logo on Zach, and by tattooed I mean applied a temporary tattoo.
Yes, which is a razor blade.
And Zach had them applied in an inappropriate spot.
That makes it sound like they put it somewhere, like, not safe for work. They put it on my wrist, which in hindsight is not appropriate. But I didn't have any other place to put it, because I just wasn't thinking. I was just like, hey, put it here. But they didn't, like, put it on my
That would have been illegal if they did that at PAX. Well, anyway, at Arcade Paradise, you run a laundromat, and in the back of the laundromat, there is arcade games. Zach talked about this a little bit when he talked about it recently played. I actually was grumpy about it because the amount of DLC that it goes with it. I then discovered that I had it from Humble Bundle, and I actually enjoy it. It was a good time. I'll eat a little bit of crow right here and say that, like, I don't think I ever disliked it. I think that I'm still anti having a ton of DLC as like microtransactions as a moral policy, but I think that Arcade Paradise is a good game. Since Zach talked a little bit about the game, where it's a lot of like different activities that you do around the laundromat to manage it, and then in your spare time you build out your arcade, and then you have to do activities with the arcade, playing games, getting achievements, putting arcades that are more popular next to older arcades to drive up popularity. I'll talk a little bit about the strategy that I've been playing, and that is called the do 3 laundry baskets and that's it. Because there is a way in the game where you can, if you do not touch the laundry baskets, they don't degrade. What you could do is you could do 3 and you set them at, maybe you time them a little bit like 5 seconds after each other so that you have some time to kind of do the action in between. So you set them all up. You get 3, you do the 3, and then you just let the rest of the laundry just pile up. And you do those 3, you get S tier ratings on all 3 of those, and you get enough money so that every 2 days in the game, you can buy another arcade cabinet, and you only have to do 3 laundries. Just do those in the morning because they're going to stack up on the little table next to them, and then do the rest of the morning, you just do whatever you want. You clean up the trash, you pull gum off the machines, you play games, but you really only spend a very limited amount of time right in the morning loading the 3 laundries that you left from the night before into the washing machine. You let the next of the laundry just stack up, and you just continue to roll those 3 laundry baskets over and over and over again, where you can earn enough money every other day to buy an arcade cabinet, progressing the game, but ultimately not doing too much work during the actual day, managing all the different, bringing in as soon as somebody drops a laundry basket off, just doing it immediately. So if you pick up Arcade Paradise and you're getting overwhelmed by the amount of laundry that's coming in, just do what I do, and every morning just do 3, and whatever, the rest of it could just wait tomorrow, because if you don't touch it, it's still an S tier laundry, and that's the most that you need to get the highest dollar back. So just take your time, earn that money slowly over time. But yeah, so it's Arcade Paradise. I think it's a pretty good game. It's got that kind of like house flipper type of like simulation aspect of the game, on top of having some games. There's like a Pac-Man game that's like Grand Theft Auto themed, which is kind of fun. I don't know if you played that one. Yeah, that one was pretty fun. That's fun. Yeah. There was some that were a little confusing for me, but I liked the lifting game with the pallets and the boxes. That was also where you have to move the boxes around and stack the boxes correctly. I thought that was a fun game as well. Did you have a fun game that you played?
I like the Pac-Man one. Oh, and the air hockey one. I like the air hockey.
Yeah. So you didn't really progress that far, is what you're telling me.
No.
You should do the three laundry trick.
I will do the 3 laundry trick, yeah.
You just do the laundry in the morning, and then you never have to worry about doing the laundry up until you close. And then you just roll it, you keep rolling it, and you'll beat the game eventually.
Well, that's fun. Well, for today's episode, we're going to talk about a game that is near and dear to my heart. I don't know if it's near and dear to Seth's heart, but Seth certainly loves the character, and that is Sonic Adventure. Now, going into our memories, Seth, do you have any memories of Sonic Adventure?
I remember a couple of things about it. I remember recently that I got it set up on my friend's RG405 that I was building out for him. And I also remember the sound, the intro music, and the first level, I think, is really what I recall the most. We didn't own a Dreamcast. I had a friend who had a Dreamcast. I would play like Crazy Taxi at my friend's house. I had a friend who was really obsessed with Shamu, and then I remember seeing a little bit of Sonic Adventure, but I did spend a lot of time playing Dreamcast at that friend's house. And they were the only person I knew that had a Dreamcast.
I ended up getting a Dreamcast for myself, but that was much later. I remember seeing ads for Sonic Adventure and also playing it in a Toys R Us or a KB Toys in one of the demo units they had set up. However, I remember really wanting a Dreamcast specifically so I could play Sonic Adventure. And I was very young when this was being advertised, because this would have been 1999 when Sonic Adventure came out. So I would have been 6, but I it's like one of the clearer memories I have of that being that young is I remember writing a Christmas list for Santa, and number 1 on the list was Sega Dreamcast, and below it said Sonic Adventure, and I like circled it and underlined it because I really wanted Santa to read that list. Santa didn't read that list. Santa didn't buy me a Dreamcast that year. It was very sad. I did end up picking up a GameCube at some point when I was younger, so we had a GameCube for a bit, and we had a copy of Sonic Adventure DX for the GameCube, which is a later released version of Sonic Adventure. I still remember to this day the ads for Sonic Adventure and me wanting it so badly, seeing it in like the ads in the Sonic comic and stuff, but alas, it wasn't meant to be at that age, but I did eventually get myself a copy of it when I was much older. Getting into the history though of Sonic Adventure, the earliest development of what would become Sonic Adventure started way back on the Sega Saturn, and we actually talked about Sonic Extreme, the game that would become Sonic Adventure in some way, back in episode 40 when we talked about the Sega Saturn. As a reminder to anyone that hasn't listened that far back or hasn't been listening for that long, Sonic Extreme was a game originally conceived to follow Sonic & Knuckles, which was released in 1994. There were plans to bring Sonic Extreme initially to the Sega 32X, and then when the Sega 32X was kind of falling apart, they decided they were going to bring it to the Sega Saturn. And it was redesigned a few times to become what would be a 3D platformer instead of the original idea, which was at first a side scroller, and then it was isometric. At the time, though, there were lots of issues going on with Sonic Extreme's development. Sega Japan executives would frequently visit the studio that was working on it, STI, and provide them tons of critique. Members of staff were getting sick. One of the staff members, Chris Coffin, who was one of the lead programmers, got pneumonia during development. Another staff member, Chris Sen, who was a designer, ended up becoming so ill that a doctor told him he only had 6 months to live. He did, in fact, project live. And basically, the team was falling apart at the seams. You had the lead programmer who was coughing up his lungs, and Chris Sen, who was being told that he was going to die. So they were understaffed. And eventually, the game would be delayed and delayed and delayed and then canceled. The overall game development of Sonic X-treme caused 3 lead programmers and half the production team to either leave the project or just never return to game development. It was bad, which was problematic for Sega. Sega really needed a 3D Sonic game, and they really wanted a Sonic game for the Sega Saturn, because the Sega Saturn didn't have a killer app. While Sonic X-treme was never released, Sonic Team were able to put out Nights into Dreams, a game where you play as teenagers who fall asleep and enter a dream world. You control Nights, who is this clown, and you fly around to collect orbs. Nights into Dreams is good, and it's a pretty good 3D game and has a pretty good 3D engine. However, STI reportedly wasn't able to use this 3D engine for Sonic X-treme because Yuji Naka, the head of Sonic Team, refused, as he believed that Sonic games should be developed in-house. So, Sonic X-treme would go through its issues, it would get canceled. Sega now had no Sonic game for the Saturn. In 1997, Sonic Team got to work using their Nights engine, though, to create a 3D Sonic game. They wanted the game to be a role-playing game that had a strong story emphasis. They put together a 20-person team, and they got to work on building this game. Sega, however, had other plans. Hayao Nakayama, the president of Sega at the time, informed Sonic Team that the Sega Saturn was going to hit the curb. The Dreamcast was around the corner, and they wanted a 3D Sonic game to be the Dreamcast's headliner. Nakayama believed that the Dreamcast would ultimately be the best system for this game. So, Sonic Team stopped what they were doing on this 3D Sonic game they were working on, and they ended up using the leftover assets for the 3D World segment in the compilation game Sonic Jam.
Now, the Sonic Team would shift gears to working on the Dreamcast and would grow their team to over 100 developers. The Dreamcast wasn't out yet and was still being developed by Sega, so Sonic Team had the unique ability to develop the game alongside the console, and even had influence over certain elements of the console. One of these was reportedly a request for the Dreamcast to have more RAM, specifically so that it could run Sonic Adventure better. Sonic Team was also able to get an on-the-rails shooter canceled called Geist Force because they wanted to use the proprietary software for Sonic Adventure. No Geist Force, only Sonic.
Which is wild to me, right? These people were putting together this launch title for the Dreamcast, Geist Force, and Yuji Naka and Sonic Team saw what they were doing with this game that was unique, and they were like, we want that. And Sega was like, all right, you can have it. And just outright canceled.
Do you think Geist Force was first party or third party?
It was first party, so thankfully it was an internal thing. But it was developed by Sega of America, who were effectively third party. The way Sega of Japan treated them.
There's like 3 guys in Sega of America like putting together Geist Force, and then the 100 Japanese team for Sonic Adventure comes in and goes, no. Now, because the Dreamcast was far more powerful than anything that Sonic had been on before, Sonic Team wanted to redesign the characters to fit the capabilities of the console. They reworked the character designs to be a bit taller and with slightly different proportions, as the artists felt that the original Genesis designs were too short and had too big of a head. Now, they worked to give the character a more Western design, with Sonic now sporting gold buckles on his shoes, longer quills, darker blue color, and green eyes. They also reworked Sonic to have longer limbs, as they wanted him to be able to be posed in 3D, which is where Sonic moves from being the kind of short, chonky guy that he was in the Sega Genesis to being the lanky guy in the Dreamcast. And for then on, because I think he's kind of lanky in the movies too. Now, Sonic Adventure has a large roster of playable characters, with 2 being designed solely to match 2 unique playstyles. Big the Cat would be designed to be a larger and more relaxed looking, as his gameplay consists of fishing. Gamma was designed as a gun-wielding robot to meet the fans' desire to have a shoot-'em-up character in Sonic. The design of Chaos, the enemy in the game, was influenced by the desire by producer Takashi Iizuka to do something that would be impossible on older hardware. He designed the character to be liquid, and transparent. Originally, Chaos was intended to have scales, but the Dreamcast was not advanced enough to show this detail in the textures. Later versions of the character do in fact show the scales.
Because this was going to be the first big Sonic game on a big console, Sonic Team would hire both a Japanese and English voice cast. The English cast includes Ryan Drummond as Sonic, Corey Bringas as Tails, Michael McGarhan as Knuckles, Jennifer Douillard as Amy, Dean Bristow as Dr. Robotnik, and Duke Nukem himself, John St. John, as Big the Cat and E102 Gamma. Along with the redesigned characters, something that Iizuka wanted to do was introduce Western audiences to the name Dr. Eggman, which is Robotnik's name in Japan. There is a line of dialogue specifically where Sonic calls Robotnik Eggman as an insult, and it happens like right after you meet him, so I'll try to find that line of dialogue and drop it in.
If it isn't Sonic!
Look, it's a giant talking egg.
Silence! I am Dr. Robotnik, the greatest scientific genius in the world!
Whatever you say, Eggman.
Enough!
And Sonic would basically refer to Robotnik as Eggman for the rest of the game and in future games, so that they wanted it to stick. To get inspiration for the game's setting, Sonic Team would travel to Mesoamerican ruins, temples, and jungles throughout South America. One of the characters added to the game, Tikal, even got her name from the ruins in Guatemala of the same name. Another element from their trip to South America was when Sonic Team members saw people sandboarding in Ica, Peru. This would be added to Tails' storyline, where Tails gets to sandboard in one of the levels. In terms of the design of the levels themselves, the team would repurpose levels for different characters during their gameplay sections, which I'll talk a bit more when we talk about the gameplay of Sonic Adventure. The gameplay is split up between all of the characters. Iizuka, however, noted that the reason they did this was because they felt that designing these intricate levels would be a waste if Sonic was just going to run through them. He wanted players to be able to take in the work that the team did, so gameplay elements of Knuckles and Big were intentionally designed to be slower than Sonic's gameplay elements. Basically, they were making these massive 3D worlds, and Iizuka was like, well, if Sonic's going to blast through here in 2 minutes flat, what's the point? So they would repurpose levels because he liked the way they looked and he wanted people to admire them.
Music of the game was scored by Jun Sunue and is great. In fact, we'll play some right here. Sunue would go on for a rock and roll style as opposed to previous Sonic games, which were more electronica. Sunue would also reuse some tracks from Sonic 3D Blast, specifically the Green Grove Zone for the Windy Valley. And the Panic Puppet Zone theme for Twinkle Park. Now, he opted to use this music because he felt it was strong enough to go with the game, and he also knew that the Genesis version of Sonic 3D Blast did not get a Japanese release, so it would be a unique music for the audience that they cared about, the Japanese market. Now, one element of Sonic Adventure's music is the fact that different characters have their own themes designed to match their personalities. The main theme would be Open Your Heart, which you would have heard at the beginning of this episode, but we'll hear a little bit more here. Now, another thing added to the game would be the Chow Garden, which allowed players to raise virtual life called Chow. This functions kind of like a 3D Tamagotchi, where players can hatch, name, and interact with the Chow. The addition of the Chow system was done to emphasize the VMU, or the memory card that the Dreamcast used, which had its own screens and buttons. The Chow could be imported into the VMU, and you could play mini games. Interestingly enough, the Chow Garden is having a resurgence, I guess.
Yeah, well, so we've talked about before Poglings, which is a game that our friends over at Premium Edition Games have been working with the Kickstarter for. And I think people fondly remember the Chow. And I know that was one of my favorite parts of playing Sonic Adventure 2, actually, was the Chow Garden. And it's a fun, robust system. It works a little differently than Tamagotchi. So when you turn off your game system, your Chow don't go hungry. They just kind of freeze where they are. However, so it's kind of like a Tamagotchi on easy mode, right? So like whenever you're not in the Chow Garden, that the Chow are just suspended in the virtual world, and when you go there you can like feed them and stuff. But yeah, it's a fun system. It's a nice break from the game, and it adds a lot of replayability.
Despite the attempts to keep Sonic Adventure secret, screenshots would be leaked mid-1998, and the game would eventually go on to then get released December 23rd, 1998, just in time for Christmas.
Now let's talk about the gameplay and the story of Sonic Adventure. Sonic Adventure has 6 playable characters, and each character has a different play style. You start off with Sonic. He's obviously the main character. It's his game, his name, but Sonic is Sonic. You have to go through the levels quickly, specifically getting to one goal. So your job is to go fast. Tails plays similar to Sonic, with the exception that, of course, he can fly. However, the other difference is that all of Tails' missions are races. So your objective is to get to the goal before either Sonic or Eggman. Knuckles' gameplay involves searching for the missing pieces of the Master Emerald. So it's a bit more of like a lost and found kind of thing. You have to like fly around a map and listen for a little ping on a radar. Amy's levels involve avoiding one of Eggman's robots who are constantly chasing you. Big's levels are fishing, and you're fishing specifically for your friend Froggy, who is a frog. And Gamma's levels are shoot 'em ups. You just go through a level and you blast your way through with a gun. The plot of the game involves Eggman reviving an ancient echidna god named Chaos. Sonic and Tails are on a quest to find the Chaos Emeralds before Eggman. Knuckles is trying to repair the Master Emerald, which contained Chaos, and Amy is getting chased by a robot because the robot is connected to an important flicky that Amy is trying to keep safe. Meanwhile, Froggy, the friend of Big the Cat, eats a Chaos Emerald, and Froggy goes missing, so Big has to track down Froggy. Also, Gamma, this robot that Eggman created, grows a conscience and decides that he's going to eradicate all of Eggman's robots. So that is the story. At one point, all of these characters cross paths. The end of the game involves Chaos becoming Perfect Chaos, a kaiju-sized monster that may decimate the world if left unchecked. So Sonic has to use the power of the 7 Chaos Emeralds to turn into Super Sonic and save the day. The game also, as a departure from previous Sonic games, features NPCs. Part of the game is set in Station Square, this human city, where you can encounter people and talk to them. And the other part of the game takes place in the Mystic Ruins, where Knuckles' floating island crashed into, and that area also has random humans that are just milling about. So it is kind of interesting. The game has these NPCs that are around. It's something that you don't see necessarily in Sonic games, at least before that. It's kind of funny when you have like Sonic, who is this blue hedgehog talking to a kind of realistic looking man.
Now, how did the game do? Sonic Adventure was a smash hit. Sega had projected it would sell 1 billion copies, and it blew expectations out of the water. In its lifetime, Sonic Adventure would go on to sell 2.5 million copies. In Europe alone, it would sell 86,000 copies during its first 5 days on sale. There were some issues with the release, as a select number of discs in the North American market failed to load properly. Sega was able to track down the bug and get working copies to customers who reported the problem. The game also was met with great reviews. The publication All Game gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. Computer and Video Games gave it a 5-star review. IGN gave it 8.6 out of 10, and GameSpot gave it a 9.2 out of 10. And the game would also be awarded the Blockbuster Entertainment Award in the Favorite Sega Dreamcast Game category, which is pretty niche. It would also be a finalist in receiving a Outstanding Achievement in Visual Engineering Award during the 3rd Annual Interactive Achievement Awards, but ultimately it would lose out to Unreal Tournament. The biggest point of complaint from reviewers at the time was the audio. Many publications noted that the game had poor lip syncing. Now, some reviews also didn't like Sonic and Knuckles voice actors, overall, the gameplay would be praised.
In terms of its legacy, Sonic Adventure would of course get a sequel, Sonic Adventure 2, which deserves its own episode, so we're going to hold off on talking about it. A re-release of Sonic Adventure was done for the GameCube called Sonic Adventure DX Director's Cut, which is odd because it's not a version of the game that specifically was like designed by the director of Sonic Adventure. They just call it Director's Cut because it's a fun buzzword. This re-release would feature updated graphics, updated textures, more detailed character models, and the 30 FPS cap removed, so the game could conceivably play at 60 frames per second. The release also included all 12 Game Gear Sonic games playable through emulation. Metal Sonic was also included as an unlockable character, and various new challenges were added. Sonic Adventure DX is arguably, in my opinion, inferior to Sonic Adventure. It's nice to have the higher res textures, it's nice to have the 12 Game Gear games added to the lineup for some reason, but the game suffers from some major issues. Certain textures were broken between Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure DX. There's also issues with the lighting effects, where certain scenes were lit differently in Sonic Adventure DX versus the way they are lit in Sonic Adventure. Also, certain animations are broken. Another problem is that bugs that are in Sonic Adventure did not get fixed in Sonic Adventure DX, so it is pretty much an aesthetic overhaul. It is not a gameplay overhaul, and that is not great. It's always good when you re-release a game to fix problems that are there, but they kind of ignored those. Sega would re-release the game again, this time just calling it Sonic Adventure, and it would be put out on the Xbox 360 and PS3 and Steam as digital downloads. This version is based on Sonic Adventure DX Director's Cut and suffers from all the same problems that I just listed. However, there has been mod teams that have got together to work on implementing fixes to correct these issues, while keeping the positives, such as the improved aspect ratio and the higher frame rate. In fact, the version of Sonic Adventure DX that I have on my computer is the modified version that I did with some mods, where it looks aesthetically the same as the original Sonic Adventure, but has all the better elements that you'd come to expect from a game running on a computer. If you are curious about the issues found in Sonic Adventure versus Sonic Adventure DX and the mods that you can find that will improve these issues, I highly recommend YouTuber Cybershell. He has a great video that goes over these problems, and he goes into detail about why these problems are a problem and how you can fix them. Outside of these releases, though, many of the characters in Sonic Adventure would remain staples in the Sonic series. For example, Big the Cat. He's a reoccurring character. He's in a bunch of Sonic games now. Levels from Sonic Adventure would also appear in the game Sonic Generations in 2011, including the fight with Perfect Chaos, which does have an updated Perfect Chaos model to have the scales that we mentioned earlier from his original design. Another fun fact is that Archie Comics and Fleetway would also do adaptations of the Sonic Adventure storyline in the Sonic the Hedgehog comic from Archie and the Sonic the comic from Fleetway. And that's also fun. It's always nice when you have adaptations, even if the Sonic Archie Comics one is not great, if I remember correctly. It's just kind of like carries the plot points, but it because Archie Comics had their own storyline, they couldn't do all the storyline. Otherwise, things would get confusing. But in any case, that would do it for our Sonic Adventure episode, and we will do an episode on Sonic Adventure 2 at some point. Now, to get into our retro rewind, Seth, do you want to go first?
Sure. Zach had me play Conan, also known as Conan: The Mysteries of Time, developed by Eastridge Technology, spelled without an H, and published by Mindscape and released in 1991 for North America. It's a side-scrolling action game where you play as Conan, and you play through 6 levels, and hidden throughout each of the levels is a special weapon to defeat the bosses. It's exceptionally difficult, even more difficult than the NES hard level of difficult. It's in fact so incredibly difficult that it's hard to even get past the first level, which I had difficulty with, and so did the people in 1991. You have to leap across these platforms while being attacked by enemies, and you only have this awkward ability to punch and kick, and you have to use the up pad on the up arrow on the D-pad to be able to jump, and you don't jump very well. It's almost kind of like if Prince of Persia had no weapons, it was getting attacked by a bunch of things at all times, and then at the end of the level there was a statue that just spammed fireballs at Prince of Persia and he died. You also, if you fall well, at any point in time, there's a bottomless pit. So GG, either you get killed by the creatures along the way, you fall into a bottomless pit, or because you couldn't find the weapon to defeat the final boss, you just get spammed by fireballs and you die. It's a rough game. It's tough, and I don't think it really holds up. Next week, Zach, you could play Axe Battler for the Sega Game Gear.
I will. Now, Seth had me play Excalibur 2097. This is an action game developed by the Japanese studios Fupak and Wins. You play as a swordsman in the year 2097 in this cyberpunk anarchic future, and it's pretty fun. The gameplay is a bit stiff, but I really like the aesthetic. Also, I really liked the music. The music was done by Psychosonic, and they also did the music apparently for Mortal Kombat Annihilation, which is a fun movie. Anyway, Excalibur 2097 is a cool game. It reminds me a bit of like Shinobi or maybe Ninja Gaiden, except maybe with less fluidity in gameplay. Whereas Ninja Gaiden, you can kind of like do a bunch of jumps and flips and stick to walls and stuff. Excalibur can't really do that. You pretty much move straight, and when you jump, it's kind of stuff. But I just found it to be fun. It's one of those games that I could definitely see if we had a Super Nintendo, us maybe renting and like playing for a weekend and then returning and probably never picking it up again, but having a good time doing so. You know, it's just one of those games that leaves a weird impact on you after you play it. Overall, I think it holds up. Next week though, Seth, you can play Perfect Dark for the Game Boy Color.
Perfect. I'm looking forward to playing a game called Perfect Dark for the Game Boy Color.
Thank you everyone for listening. If you have any memories of Sonic Adventure, be sure to email us at classicgamingbrothers@gmail.com. We're also available on Facebook as Classic Gaming Brothers, Instagram as Classic Gaming Brothers, X as CG Brothers Pod, Blue Sky as CG Brothers Pod, and we're available on Threads as Classic Gaming Brothers. You can find us on YouTube under Classic Gaming Brothers, and we're available wherever podcasts can be found, be it iHeartRadio, Podbean, or iTunes. And with that, am I forgetting anything?
Don't play games like my brother.
And don't play games like my brother.
I've been Seth.
And I've been Zach.
And we've been the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's
right.
That's right.